Hmm. I would like to make a comic. Hmm. They say it's real easy. I guess I should get started. Wow, it was that easy. And look, here it is, ready to be read. Hardly any work at all. All I had to do was sit here. Amazing! Ta-da! Seriously, I wish it were that easy. So we're here today to talk about comic book making because a few people, not naming any names because it's been more than one, but the more rude and thoughtless stand out in my mind, of course. But a few people have apparently got absolutely no idea how much work making a comic really is. And these are the same people that say, and I'm going to try to quote one of them to you. They said something to the effect of, oh, well, I was going to ask you to do some real writing. Then there's the other side of it where someone said, oh, well, I was hoping you did real art because I use 3D in my comic these days. And then there's, oh, well, since you're not really doing much right now, can you do this and this and this for me? Usually it's related to one of the skills that I do in a comic. I'm pretty sure that only other cartoonists are going to watch this and they're going to pat themselves on the back and go, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Guys, you guys need to stand up for yourselves and say, no, no, this is a lot of work. So there's an article on Blambot by Nate, I hope I'm saying this right, Picos. And one thing he says in it that really, really, really makes sense is a comic without a story is nothing. And that is where you start, writing your comic book story. Now, in my head, I consider comic book writing a little bit close, not exactly, but close to writing a decent film script. You're doing dialogue, you're doing scene, you're keeping the flow at a certain pace. Usually with comics, you actually sometimes have to set a little bit of a faster pace because with film, you can actually, the actors can put in some nuances and feelings. With comics, it's up to the comic artist. And Wendy Pini does a really excellent job of doing it in one page of ElfQuest. Some humans had come across the desert where the elves were hiding, and Cutter, the chief of the Wolf Riders, is faced with this decision. In three glorious panels, Cutter agonizes. So we go from one expression to the middle expression to where he finally makes his decision, and he says, go. This was a really excellent emotional sequence that Wendy Pini did, and it took three panels to do so. On one comic page, you don't have as many panels as you sometimes think you do. There was somebody I was working with, and he wanted to fill the pages with dialogue, nothing but talk, 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 which, by the way, killed my reader base. You don't have enough page. It's not like the page scrolls forever. Even with web comics, there's a stopping point. So you've got to really keep that flow going and learn how to have your characters be unique and yet not talk like one of my friends who will ramble on for days. You got to really be able to build that world, that story, in all three mediums, film, prose, and comic script writing. Now, I have seen comic scripts from, I can't remember if it was Marvel or DC when I was flatting. And one thing I noted was that it actually opened up with, and the villain pops into the bar with a tagline, some cool sounding tagline. And I realized just how cookie cutter some of those comic scripts out there are. And they're banged out in a hurry. And the reason why they're banged out in a hurry is because Marvel and DC have very rushed deadlines. The difference between a comic script and, say, filming, I mean, it's already stark differences between a comic script and prose, right? You would think so. I mean, one's a script. You've got panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, and prose is, and then the lady walked down the forest, and she was thinking to herself, oh, those leaves are green, when it was not. It was winter, but she was delusional because she was thinking that comics are easy to make. The differences between a comic script and a film script is that with the comic script, you're also peppering in a little of the skills that you use for prose. You are thinking of your time and place, which happens in film, but you are building a time and place by describing the scenery. In all the film scripts I have read, practice from play scripts, that wasn't as in depth. I mean, there would be instructions before the beginning of a scene or something, but that's about it. With a comic script, you've got panel 1 by the foyer. Tom and Jane are standing by the couch. Jane is really upset and she's so mad, her boobs are jiggling, and Tom is like staring at her boobs. And then panel 2. Jane is really getting the point across at this point, and she's really expressing, and she's got her arms in the air, and Tom is getting hit in the face with the boobs. With the film, all of the film scripts I have read, you don't have that. You've got scene 1 in the foyer. Scene 1 in the foyer. Tom and Jane are discussing. Jane is really, really distressed over the fact that her boobs won't stop moving. And she's had it, and then, it might give some backstory for Jane. She's had a trying week. She's really exhausted, and she hasn't been able to sleep because of this. Tom can't stop staring. It isn't that he's wanting to touch them, it's that it's weird to him, and he just can't stop staring. And then that's the instructions of scene 1. And then you've got this dialogue. Jane says, oh my God, they won't stop moving. Tom says, well, what are we going to do about it? Jane says, I don't know. I've tried everything. I've tried sports bras. And you've got that down. And the best scripts I have read didn't micromanage the actors and tell them, and then Jane throws up her arms. Jane does this. Gives the actors room to act. But a comic script, on the other hand, is micromanaging. So you're panel 1 micromanaging, panel 2 micromanaging. So you're writing basically mini scripts, mini scenes for one page. So let's say you've got a four panel page, then you're panel 1 micromanage, panel 2 micromanage, panel 3, and you're going through every one. Now, with my scripts, I don't bother with all that, although I could, and sometimes I do. If like I'm writing my script and I had this really cool idea for panel 4, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to write it in detail in panel 4 so that I can remember later. But because they're my scripts for me, I don't have to go through as much detail. But with a lot of comics, especially the professional comics, well, they're not for the person writing the script, they're for the pencilist. With comic scripts, you also need to know cinematography. Yep, you do. Because, and this is why I think of it as writing a film script, you need to know your camera angles. You need to think of your lighting. You need to think what will look best. You need to consider emotions. And when is it going to be a close-up on the actor to get the audience pulled in emotionally? When is it going to be far away? Is it going to be bird's eye view, or is it going to be worm's eye view? What is most dramatic? And you're thinking this panel per panel per panel. So while you're writing it, not only are you writing this film script, you're being the director. Now, execution depends on who you're working with, but this script is really essential, and it is a ton of work. Oh, I banged out my script in one weekend, and that's why it sucks. That's why it sucks. There are some people out there that are super, super talented, and they can really, really tell a story, or maybe they're just cheap and they're following the same formula every time. The script to The Heavenly Bride. It took me, honest to God, a year to write the script. Now, the books are, it's about a 4 to 5 to 6 chapter book, so maybe 20 chapters. It took me a year to write 20 chapters. for this comic book. Akashic, which I'm currently working on right now on chapter 1. The script was already mostly written, so it didn't take me as long because I was pulling from the script from before. And before, it took me a couple of weeks to write script 1. Let me tell you, it sucked. It sucks. So now that I'm revisiting the scripts and going over it years later, it's taking me some time to redo what was already done. Because, as with prose, as with comic scripts, as with film scripts, you need to write more than one draft. You need to make sure things are flowing. You need to keep it from being a boring story. You've got to find your conflict. There is a lot to it, and I could just keep rambling randomly in different directions about it because I don't have a script in front of me for this. But I think I'm going to move on. I hope to God you got the point. What's step 2? Oh, you think it's penciling. You think it's drawing the panels, don't you? No, it's thumbnails. More work. Yes, more work. Thumbnails? What the heck? I want to get to the meat and I want to create. No, it's thumbnails. Why? So that you can have a guideline to create from. You basically draw these rough ideas of how you want the panels, and in my case, the pages too, to look. And many people, when they're creating their thumbnails, well, they're really good artists, and the thumbnails kind of look like they could be fleshed out right then and there into the comic page. I draw stick figures. I've always drawn stick figures. I find a piece of scrap paper, and I draw this little itty bitty thumbnail about this big, and I figure out where my panels are going to go, and I look at my dialogue, and I figure out where the dialogue is kind of going to go because it never ends up the same because I'm not very good at this. And then I draw stick figures so that I know where people are going to be placed. And yes, my female stick figures have boobies. So now you've got your thumbnails. What's next? Finally, penciling. Yay, penciling if you're hand drawing. Penciling. So yeah, I got your art table. And then you pencil everything out lightly. Lightly if you're going to ink. No, you're doing pencils, not the final draft, not the final bit. Okay, let's say I've got my pencils. What's next? Now that depends on your work process. Some people will ink directly over the pencils. Some people will just use the pencils. They're called pencil comics. Some people will scan in the pencils on the scanner and use a process to create a blue line, which is basically turning everything into blue lines, and print it back out on another piece of paper so they can ink it. It really depends on who and what they are, who and what you are. Obviously, one way takes less time than the other. When I am drawing by hand, I actually with Heavenly Bride, I actually prefer creating blue lines. One, it creates a archival history of what I'm doing, so I keep everything in a book. And that has saved me more than once. Sure wish I knew where the former roommate threw away the last chapter, though. With Akashic, I have my thumbnails, and then I am sitting down and I am creating 3D art for it. And so I am lining up the camera, lining up the scenery, and then I am placing everything. And if you think that takes less time than drawing and is easier than drawing, then you truly know nothing about the 3D process. So you've got inking over pencils. All right, that's going to be a lot of work. And then we've got creating the blue line, which is scanning. And then there might be a process called stitching involved, depending on how big the page is. And then there's the people who just scan in the pencils and don't do anything. Obviously, they're just going to scan it in, right? They're just going to scan it in. So we're going to start with the people who just scan in. They scan in their pencils. And now we're down to page prep. They scan in their pencils. Oh, that's it, right? No. Because now they have to do things like correct levels, tell it contrast, bring out this, whiten the background, whatever it takes to make that page look decent and not smudged. So their job isn't over until that page is completely done. Same thing with the person inking over their pencils. If they're wise, they'll scan it first, just in case, and then they're inking. And this can take a little while. This can take a little while depending. I mean, you know, with inking, and I'm not very good at inking. With inking, you have to know brush variants, even if you're not using brushes old school, you know, and using pens. You have to know brush variants, and you've got to have all these skills, and you're going to sit there for a little while. And when you're inking, you're not going, okay, they drew a mermaid there, I'll just draw a mermaid. No, no, you're actually tracing the lines. And as you're tracing the lines, you're improving upon them. Okay, this line needs to be thicker. This needs to come out more. This needs to pop. An inker's job is a careful one. You know, they have to have these art skills while not really being allowed to ad-lib at the same time. Sometimes, yes, I had seen it where the inker had to ad-lib, but overall, you're supposed to obey the pencil artist's work. So now you've got it inked. And now you can, you know, scan it and prep it, or, you know, old school, you know. But you're gonna, and it's gonna be one of, depending on who you are, you're either gonna color directly on that page that's inked, which I have done. There is a side story for the Heavenly Bride that I did this that way. I penciled it, then inked it, and then I colored it with colored pencil. I think it's called Two Birds in a Stone. I can't remember what I named it, but it's about a girl who really wanted this big rock for her palace garden. Some people will scan in the inked version and they'll color it digitally. Digital coloring is actually more common now than hand coloring. I also prefer to digitally color. So let's say that it's put in for coloring. Now you are going to do one of two ways. You're going to just start painting, not recommended, or you're going to flat it. There are people who flat for a living. Like I said, it's grueling. And what they're doing is they're selecting all the shapes inside and they're giving it individual colors. And that's oversimplified. There's a little bit more to it than that, but we're not talking about flatting today. And then the page comes back all prepared so that the colorist can select the pages using his wand tool and paint just those areas. And it speeds up the colorist's job by a huge amount. As a matter of fact, flatting speeds up your job, period. It is real art no matter the medium you use. Okay, and you don't got to know it just once for that 4-panel page. You've got to know it 4 times per page. 4 times, if not more, sometimes less. 4, because you're not only doing one panel and then worrying about the composition in that panel. You're doing the second panel and doing the composition of that panel, etc., ad nauseum. You've got to know your art composition. You've got to know art. You've got to know depth and perspective and mood. I was at a thing a couple of weeks ago at a convention, and this person who wrote comics said that most colorists don't care about mood in their panel. And I didn't stay for that. I got up and walked out because that guy was clearly talking out his butt. All of the colorists I worked for gave a big damn about mood in their panels. They're making that one little panel a work of art. Sometimes they're trying to make it a masterpiece every single panel, and those comics kick butt. Now let's say you've got your page created. Now it's time to letter it. The artist had to make sure there was room in each and every individual panel for these letters to be put, problem 1. It is genuinely difficult for me to remember to make sure there is space in this piece of art to put a word balloon. So the letterist has the job of putting the lettering on the panels, make sure it's legible, make sure it also emotes. Yes, lettering needs to express emotion sometimes too. Make sure it doesn't crowd out the thing. There are guidelines to lettering, things like don't overlap the art. When it comes to the word I, as in myself, there are times it looks capital, and then there's, when you use the capital, and then there are times you don't. When it comes to lettering, I suck at it so bad that there's this little program that I consider my savior called Comic Life 3. And it really, really, really compensates for my lack of training. And it does a great job. But there are times there are times where it's too limited for me and I have to step outside the box. And that's the thing with lettering. You need to be able to step outside the box. The original letterist to Akashic, Ginny Anderson, otherwise known as War, her lettering was so amazing, but she also has a degree. And her lettering was phenomenal. I was looking at one panel last night as I was going over things and going, oh, I want to keep that, and I want to keep that, and I want to keep that as I rewrite it. And there's this one panel where Talis, the main protagonist, is being dragged along because she doesn't want to go by her yeoman, and she's got nails, and it's screech in the way War did it. You can actually hear the screech in your head. Lettering is important and essential to a really good comic if that comic has sound. So now you've got it all lettered. All right, now you have to assemble it. You can assemble it in one of many ways. You can assemble it for being a web comic where it's destined to become a print comic later, or you can just assemble it straight to print. That takes some work, that takes some know-how, that takes publishing know-how. That takes knowing about things like bleed, safe area, the trim, RGB versus CMYK, what your printer wants, spine width, the whole kit and caboodle that I deal with nearly every day as a publisher. And with a comic book, it's a bit more work. If you're doing straight to ebook, which a lot of people have chosen to do because it's cheaper for them, you've got to know EPUBs. You've got to know how to convert to a Kindle to Kindle. So now you've got your book. Now you've got to figure out, is it getting published by Dark Horse? Good for you. Are you doing it yourself? Oh, if you're doing it yourself, welcome to the world of business. And that alone is a ton of work. It is so much work. You can spend days doing this one marketing / uploading / publishing / checking the book to make sure it looks good / getting copies / going to conventions and having a table / you name it, PR. Look at me, I'm shiny, without being a jerk, because trust me, the comic world is a tiny world even. And then chapter 2, you've got to do it all over again. Because where somebody who does a painting, that painting is it, it's done, they can now move on to the next painting, possibly even another topic. Not with your comic if your comic is more than a one-shot comic. For that person that has written that movie script, it took them a long time, and a year later they've got this finished movie script, and now it's time for their own marketing plan of getting somebody to back it and maybe sell it to a studio to see it get made, or in some cases sold so it can be buried because the studio doesn't want the competition, and it's over, they can move on to another topic. For comic artists, it is not over. I mean, I wrote The Heavenly Bride. It took me a year to write The Heavenly Bride. There's still a part of it that's not completely written because I'm not there yet. With Akashic, the difference between my work and the work I just described is that my work is actually a little bit more. It will take me weeks. If it doesn't take only a day, it will take me weeks, because I'm using 3D, to set up a scene that's probably only going to be 4 to 8 panels long. That is a lot of work, people. And then I do the panels. And I say to myself, this panel's going to be easy. I'm going to set the characters already. I just got to move them a little bit, right? No, because you know what happens to me? Several hours later, I'm still worried about lighting, mood, emotion. This character doesn't look panicked enough. This character doesn't look angry enough. Why are the wings doing this? And then I finally get panel 2 done. And I still got other panels to go. And I'm at this for hours at a time. It would be nice if I could get done with this chapter this week, because I would like to have it done before Archon, which is coming quickly. But I'm not holding my breath, because I'm also reading an audiobook at this time, because, that comes to the final element of making your own comic. Forget about being rich, people. You think just because Stan Lee made it that, they also have their movie franchise. They have stuff that's pulling in the money, but this little indie guy, like me, You know, I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head. Bloodbound. Bloodbound. There's this vampire comic called Bloodbound. So me and Bloodbound, we're working our butts off. We can't really consider, oh, we're going to be rich. It would be great if we could make some sales. It would be great if the thing would pay the bills. And there are some lucky comic artists out there, web comic artists out there who get the support they need, and they're making it, and they can at least pay some bills, and I applaud them. Their stories are really good too, which is one of the things I'm trying to do with Akashic is make it very engaging. Um, so, you know, it would be great, but we don't have a lot of money. So so whenever you ask us to do something for free, if we choose to do it, and we do, because I like to act and I like to be part of the film scene, and that is what I am doing for myself. So if I agree to help you, it is not because I have oodles of time. It is not because I have oodles of money and can afford to take myself away from my paying commissions. It's because your project interests me. When we say we're busy, we're truly busy. When we say we're working, we're truly working. It is very, very, very insulting. It is deep down insulting when you tell somebody that their hard work isn't really work. It's not work in the sense it's not paying the bills, but that doesn't mean we don't rub the elbow grease out any more than somebody else does writing that 10th, sequel to their popular drama. I think I've covered all of the layers of work, and at this point, I think I'm at the end of my ramble. And it's a ramble because I stepped into it not really knowing what I was going to say. I just have this list here. That's why you keep seeing me look to the side, because I've been reading this list. So I'm going to let my ramble stand, because to fix it would be a lot of work.